It looks like it. Wow.
It was a god and lightning, but
Beautiful.
snowy.
Okay, let's begin. Welcome back, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and for some of you, good morning. And for apparently many of you, it is a snowy day, but here we are, and glad to have you back. Welcome back to the final day of the 2021 Network Performing Arts Production Workshop. We had amazing presentations yesterday and want to thank the speakers for sharing their time and expertise. And I want to remind all of you, and I'm going to put this in the chat window right now, that the Network Performing Arts Production Workshop website, we will soon post all of the recordings and the presentation materials from this entire workshop for your reference. So look there for good materials going forward, and any announcements, that's where they will be. We have another great set of presenters today, so let's begin. Our first panel highlights a wonderful project called the Co-Creation Lab that was founded by Delma Rodriguez, who is the director of the Latin America Europe Cultural Ring in Uruguay. I owe Delma an apology. We do not have the translation feature yet, but we are about to. So I thank you, Delma, for presenting for us in English today. I know it is a lot more work for you. And actually, I thank all of our colleagues, everybody, so many of you are presenting in your second language, and we really appreciate it. Joining us also is Justin Trieger, who is the Director of New Media and Distance Learning at the New World Symphony. Notably, Justin has hosted this workshop many times, and we thank him for his commitment to this community. And finally, we're joined by Tom Gorman. Tom is a senior lecturer in theater at the School of Media and Performing Arts at Coventry University. Please welcome our panelists, and we'll begin with you, Delma.
Thank you, Anne. I will share my desktop. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Are you ready?
I think we are.
Yeah, we're ready. We have a script. But before we continue, I'd like to ask the audience if you know the story of the Three Little Pigs.
Well, Tom, before we get too far, let's just point out that this is a metaphor, and Delma, you and I are not actually the little pigs in this conversation, but I believe there is a big bad wolf that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, it is a requirement that you know this story before we do this talk, though.
Yes, exactly, Tom and Justin. It's a requirement because our title is Non-Scholar Talk with Tips to Become Creative in the Academic Life. We were inspired to make this ludic talk in the last exchange done with Anne Doyle. Her appreciation about Co-Creation Lab in these findings about the endeavors, etc. All her comments motivate his talk, or likely it's not a talk, it could be a game. Let's play. Okay, with this notification previously, here we go.
Exactly, and there were so many adventures through this project.
In arts, yeah, in arts, sciences, ICT, and Delma.
Yes, crossing continent through internet. The kickoff of the Co-Creation Lab was May 23 in 2019 officially, In that meeting, the speaker were Claudio Alocchio, launching Lola for the Latin region, Justin Trieger, performing art networkings, Tom Gorman, telepresent theater, Domenico Vicinanza with art, science, and technology, and the author of the book, The Art of Co-Creation. They are Brian Reel and Matti Amalainen from US and Finland as well. Okay, what is the aim of Co-Creation Lab? Co-Creation Lab is a research and intervention project in the framework of Cultural Ring in Uruguay. Collective creation networking through advanced internet is the proposal. A transdisciplinary approach in art, science, mediated by ICT. The lab for human and technology experimentation has a distributed modality where the participant or co-creators will connect live from different countries, regions, and continents. The features of the lab imply attractive and unexpected possibility into the collective intelligence and personal capabilities of all those motivated to create. Co-Creation Lab takes place in collaborative local and global scenarios provided by several academic networks. The lab offers the opportunity to participate in an innovative scenario with relevant international reference with past experience. Also, the lab will facilitate the development of, first, multicultural learning processes in the generation of new ideas projects, as well as, second, skills in ICT mediation in a fertile atmosphere of exchange. To sum up, our motto is Co-Creation Lab invites you to do something new through networking. Next one slide, yes. In this slide, you can see the action plan and 2019 agenda in the managing project. For instance, in the global call, we received 87 applications from 4 continents. And finally, for the kickoff, we gathered 40 potential co-creators in art, science, technology, and society fields. We developed this exact plan with 5 sections: teams, toolkit, meeting points, prototypes, rehearsals, to acting on stage. Also, there were 3 main training encounters on May and September. In these labs, from May to September, the co-creators had the opportunity to make the co-creation experience. And important detail in the graph, it's a rope going to the other side in the next year. It means to continue in prospective way. In this slide called Where Are We, or Where Were We in 2019, and the next one slide depict with details where the lab people came from or connect to the lab or the experience. Lab people implies or includes co-creators, staff, collaborators, advisor, etc. I don't know if Tom or Justin want to comment something or continue in this.
I think continue. We'll comment, I think, a little bit later. Okay.
Okay. The second one is the visual concept of the project with an organizational graph. Please keep attention on the symbols and colors related to each one's role in the lab. For instance, we can identify the co-creator with a red color, or the speakers and advisors with green hexagons, or another one, advisor with yellow hexagons, collaborator, connectors, interpreters, co-creation lab team, etc. Co-creation trip is a concept coined in the book The Art of Co-creation regarding the non-linear process in transdisciplinary co-creation. As you can see, the traveling between co-creators in red, the advisors green or yellow, collaborator, etc. About the co-creators, you can check the increasing participation. There was a natural selection in the amount of co-creators from 40 to 11. Also, you can see the participation of the rest of the lab in different moments of the process. After the training in the kickoff, the next activity was Brains on the Beach. It's a proposal in the book. I adapted that to the online environment, recreating a beach for the video conference meetings, giving the perception of a well-being way to the co-creators to motivate them the first exchange. It was useful to break the ice in multilingual communication and to include the first synchronous or asynchronous IT tools with translator bots and simultaneous interpretation as well. The co-creators could see the other participants in their home environment, sharing the pets, etc. A lot of anecdotes regarding that. Meanwhile, the time advanced in the process, we collected 11 ideas with a transdisciplinary approach, generating associations between the co-creators that made the contributions, etc. A lot of interactions. Naturally, we're shaping them in the process. Well, in this part, I would like to mention this point. From the 11 ideas collected, the meeting points with the advisors happened, and I would like to introduce Justin and Tom for sharing their experiences because the process was focused to build the conceptual project and its presentation to the jury in the final stage. Justin, Tom, I don't know if you want to share.
Tom, would you like to go first?
I was going to, we're all being terribly polite to each other. I should say, possibly to some people looking at this, it looks incredibly complicated. It probably looks like a circuit diagram or some kind of arcane kind of magic circle type incantation. And it is remarkably complicated, this process. The thing that I would say, and I think it's down to it, during the pandemic, I tried to teach myself magic tricks and failed. But it's the difference between us amateurs and a skilled professional. Delma makes it very easy for us to participate in this. So this complexity isn't felt by us in the co-creation lab. We're kind of, in production terms, we take it one step at a time. So we're very much advising our co-creators, and we are guided through this very complex process ourselves, and even more complicated when you factor in the translators and everyone else that's also working on this project. And one project I'm working on, there are people in South America, also people in New Zealand, etc. Myself, who's in the UK. And it is remarkably, once you're kind of in the thick of it, it's a remarkable, easy, intuitive, and collaborative process to follow, which when you kind of pull back to get the full view of it, is actually a remarkably complicated process.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. And I think what the co-creation lab demonstrates in a way that perhaps is superior to a lot of projects and collaborations that I've been a part of is exactly what you said. As far as participants, we are only given as much as we need to be there and to do the job that we have to do. And all of our concerns and expectations are clearly established and met along the way. So although the process appears very complicated, inevitable feeling of participating is one that's very fun and carefree. And I think the projects when we got to this phase were very interesting because the co-creation groups were compiled of a number of different people from different continents, as we've already talked about, but also wildly different disciplines and interests. So there was everything from biomedical research, I think, to a high voltage artist in one sense, and then more traditional performing arts folks representing. So the projects were very, very creative in their approach to actually coming up with this conceptual design that Delma was going to talk more about in a little bit. But it was a nice melting pot experience, and was really just a joy to see how all of these different people with their different interests came together and tried to make something together.
To sum up, the results between the prototypes and rehearsal sections were 5 projects profiled in art, science, technology, and society. And then finally, there appeared 3 final projects to present with the jury on September. The process were about, for instance, an artistic telematic event about the birds' migration and how electricity towers disoriented them, or another one project was about bioma and microscope life at home, connected dance, etc. The last one project was about the design to create an interactive game in art and science for a museum. Very well. All the final presentation are available to watch in our YouTube channel in English, Spanish, and Portuguese, and also the training from the expert in the 3 languages. Well, the next one slide depicts reviewing the whole process. We make out 3 functionality notice. What? The groups define their specific topics, how or the know-how, Tom and Justin will mention their experience, and to follow, it means 2 kinds of perspective. To follow from the co-creator side, to follow the project in the near future, and to follow up from the lab within perspective way. ICT mediation. How it works. ICT mediation to explore and multilingualism are the categories found. It was the first great feedback to reinforce to co-creators that the lab works and flows. I found a category called Empathic Visualization. We detected that the video conferences were fundamental for co-creators, like an empathic visualization to associate ideas, exchange, and select something new. It was not in a rational way, it was more in an emotional mood. It improves or to make looking forward to facilitating other decisions ahead related to analyze, compile, and define. Well, between before, meanwhile, and after of the process noticed by themselves, for the co-creators, there are a lot of anecdotes or cases of study. For instance, this case explains the indirect strategy that we developed in terms of facilitating the co-creation process. It happened into a proactive group with some type of issues in the process to converge in a common proposal. And I detected the situation and asked to Brian Reel for help with a piece of advice directly with the group, because it's very important, the otherness or external side view. Then I generated other situation to check if a specific person in the group understood some reactions and attitudes to change. And together with the co-creator involved, who asked me where the problem was, it allows me to explain to her or him some fossilized reaction in the process. I pointed out where there was the permanent blocked situation, the value of Brian Real intervention, and a role of facilitator for helping the group. The co-creator said, I've not noticed that, thanks, etc. After that response, the group flowed very well, and they reached the goal. Therefore, I found that it's very important to continue in the co-creation pedagogy as creative pedagogy or heuristic pedagogy. It's a key point, this finding. Well, the second one is glocal, is a syncretism, and it implies a permanent link between global and local features. The second one is the co-creation pedagogy implies cultural education strategies and educational cultural training. It's a huge intertwined field, and it should be based into the co-creation pedagogy as mentioned before. The transparent background in blue means the different layers in the process, and when the project ended, we built categories, concepts emerged in the lab process. Okay, here in this 2020, well, it's the second edition. It's a new project ongoing, engaging experiences, co-creators and creators. Tom, Justin, I don't know if you want to say something regarding a little bit short comment, because it's ongoing.
Delma, you're carrying the ship for us. I think the structure and using Tom and myself as advisors, as people who are experienced in producing events and performances reliant on networking and teleconferencing, telematics, was really great, because the groups naturally did some wild brainstorming and came up with very very expansive ideas that needed to be refined and practically assisted in their execution. And so the role that I found myself playing most of the time was thinking through the artistic and conceptual nature of these projects and recommending approaches to actually putting them into reality, either through technology or through creative means. So it was very intelligently laid out, in that these groups of, as I said before, disparate interests, disparate people, disparate regions of the world, co-created a concept, and then were invited to have regular conversations with people who are familiar working in the medium in which these projects were intended to be realized. And that was a very good structure, in my opinion. Tom, tell us about your experience.
I think I would echo. I mean, I came to this project through making theatre telematically, which I've been doing since 2016 with Finland. But oddly, I found that I used more of my experience in my day job, which is, working with students and actors and professionals in putting on shows. So I found myself, like Justin, confronted by these huge conceptual ideas. And it's a bit like somebody saying to you, I've got the theme of love. And you're going, well, is it a song or a play or a novel or a short story or a computer game or a painting? And so I found myself asking groups really just very basic but very difficult questions, like, what are you trying to make? You know, where is it going to be? These very practical questions I ask my own students, which are, who is your audience? Where are you staging that? And that can be a physical venue or a virtual venue, or a blend of both physical and virtual. And only kind of after we'd answered all of those questions, like, do you need dancers? Do you need musicians? Do you need none of these? Are we talking about avatars or a program or something? And they kept on trying to tell me about the idea. They'd say, but it's about this. And I go, I don't care anymore. I just want to know what this thing is. And, you know, you've defined the theme, you've got a great theme, you've got something that's about something, and it's fascinating. And the way you've linked arts and sciences together is absolutely fascinating, you know, but I need to know if I, you know, eat it or, you know, take it for a ride to work or something like that. I need to know what the object or thing will be at the end of it. And I found myself really kind of drilling into these difficult questions with them all the time and really putting them on the spot to define what it was they were trying to make.
I do think there was a commonality among the groups, though, in what they were hoping to accomplish in doing these projects, which was interesting. So, and this is not unfamiliar to this group or others who are working in this space, in terms of taking research from the sciences and using the arts to communicate the impact of the data and the findings. That was kind of this underlying current, both in the bird migration project, which was trying to demonstrate the feeling of migratory birds as they encounter high power attention lines in their that didn't previously exist in their natural migration patterns. So how do you use the arts to communicate that experience? And then there was another project which looked at kind of the unseen functions of biology that underlie everything in our everyday lives, and trying to magnify that and communicate that type of those types of interactions and processes in an artistic means. And so, you know, Domenico's on this call. He's done lots of really great things with visualizations of sound data and other kinds of seismic data converted into music. And this has always been kind of a nice focal point for network performing arts, in terms of using these tools in this medium, this online medium, to really, in a visceral way, communicate the findings in more scientific data that can be much more difficult for the regular person to approach. So interesting that that's where we eventually landed.
Okay, the next one.
I've got dialogue again, I'd forgotten. I'm a bad actor.
Yes.
So, do you remember the story of the Three Little Pigs? And my line's on the screen and I'm looking at the script. This is terrible. I'll leave.
And the wolf. And the wolf.
The question is?
Who is the wolf?
Exactly. We need to block the wolf. Of course, the symbolic wolf. We need to detect what is, how it works, the wolf in our co-creative practices, and
You go first.
These are our lines, Justin. Everything that kills, everything that kills the creativity and co-creativity as well.
Yes. Okay, moraleja or lesson learned, according to the story, the Three Little Pigs.
Which are the best materials to build the co-creation house with?
Yes. As you can see, there are our tips to start building a strong co-creation house. There are more tips, but in this slide are the tips for helping the newcomers in co-creation. It's a summary that we mentioned before: natural selection, about free association and clear step in the process, the perception that the co-creators, that there were not external obstacles, enriched idea environment, multiple advisors, expanded environment to express the self. For instance, I don't know if Tom or Justin want to mention the farm, because one of the co-creators connected from her farm. Yes, go ahead.
I always enjoy this reference because I live in Miami, as most of you know, and have wild chickens all around my house. So whenever someone mentions someone on a video conference with farm noises, I assume it's me. But in this case, this was Delma, you have to remind me which country, but one of the co-creators was stationed on a rural farm in South America. And it just was a very demonstrative contrast against some of the other participants who were at higher education institutions and in very institutional environments. So it was a nice mix.
Yes, the connection from hour for the different time zone, for instance, from New Zealand, or include the body because there were dancers in the lab, etc. Pieces of advice for the groups, there were very important: the bound, common conversion, the solidarity, etc. The findings, but the findings together, the challenge in the near future, looking forward final results, the process, direct and indirect strategies, mainly facilities to learn and notice by themselves, the co-creators, and the permanent feedback. Last but not least, balance with frustrations, because it's very complicated in some moment, the interaction, and above all, to converge in a common goal. Okay, what is the moraleja or lesson learned? Yes.
The wolf is blocked, and perhaps one of the ways of blocking the wolf is to use some of these tips that Delma mentioned in the previous slide, and so hopefully that can block the metaphorical wolf.
Yes, the wolf should be blocked or at least controlled in whatever co-creation process that you develop. And I would like to get back to the beginning of the presentation to ask again, where are we? Okay, in terms of the field that we are making. And
yeah, we're in the e-culture field, and we'd like to share this quote from Doyle, who of course everyone knows here, about how we can learn together in e-culture. I'm going to hand the quote to Justin too.
This is much easier because if folks couldn't tell, I'm forced to be on my phone at the moment due to an internet outage, and I can't look at my script and the slides at the same time. So this is helpful. So how can we learn together, says Doyle. There's a great and wonderful irony. In my opinion, the most amazing innovations in technology are in this field, but it's not about the technology. It's about sharing culture, sharing music, dance and theater and art, inventing the future.
Yes, and received an e-culture award in category trajectory. The quote is clear and has the vision of e-culture. And continue with this question, I would like to share our final reflections for sharing with all of you in terms of step forward that co-creation lab looking forward the future, and to sum up, to expect that something new appear, we need to generate different conditions to create, co-create, communicate, exchange, and share. Even we should leave the ancient ways on modalities of the artistic creation in e-culture known already. We need to reshape and focus on ethic, good practices methodologies, and co-creation pedagogies, future e-culture. Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks. I would like to say a special thanks to Anne and her team for organizing this event and the amazing opportunity to share the experience. Thanks to all Co-Creation Lab transnational teams. And thank you, Tom and Justin, for always continuing to create together. Thank you so much. On time or not? On time, Anne?
Close.
I think we're a little early, but
yeah, no, you are on time, and we actually have time for a question that I wanted to ask you, Delma, and as panelists. First of all, I want to say thank you. What a wonderful presentation, but also with some nice humor and a little bit of theater. Tom, only a little bit.
Oh, I was saying a very little bit.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, an observation that Justin made the other day, is that, Delma, you have involved people at the edges of the network. For instance, Lucia Vandenberg, a farmer from Uruguay, was involved in one of the co-creation projects. What have you learned about how to do these projects over rural and home broadband? And it's a question to all of you, because as we grapple with the digital divide, as we look to the future to keep involving people that we've learned to involve this past year during COVID, help us think about this. What have you learned about involving people at the edges of the network?
Mainly the motivation, because in the case of Lucia that you met last week, she connected from the institution firstly, and then when the group follow with a lot of activity, etc., well, she needs connect from whatever place. What is my place is my farm. And I think that the bound that I mentioned in this slide, the bound, it's very important to concentrate the force of the group and to motivate a lot in whatever place and whatever moment that the group need to solve the problem or the situation or the topic or how to make something, etc. It's not a technological response, because it's a human interaction.
I can add a technological response to that, Anne, if you'd like. One thing that I appreciate about Delma's coordination of the project is, as I said before, her ability to set expectation and provide information at the right times as needed. And I think for those folks who were challenged from a connectivity standpoint, she made sure that everyone was working from the same information and was provided the same resources prior to each one of our online meetings, so that everyone was referencing the same materials and was coming to that conversation prepared to discuss whatever was in those documents. And in that way, the technical challenges, if and when they did crop up, weren't so impactful, because again, everyone had all of the resources required in the beginning and could reference them if they got disconnected and wouldn't get lost in the conversation, because there was always these guiding, supporting documents to help manage the interactions. And so I think, and that's the recommendations that I always give, is that you need to assume that there's going to be some kind of an issue. And so how are you going to mitigate that before it happens? just, thoughtful planning agendas and documentation and resources that are distributed ahead of time go a long way in mitigating those technical impacts.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a good perspective that it's motivation, it's being very organized, it's documenting, and that is really what gets to success here. So I think if there are not any further comments from our panelists, there is no harm in ending a few minutes early and giving me time to introduce our next panel. Thank you, Delma and Justin and Tom. What a great presentation and a very inspiring example of how to go about extending this creative innovation to new regions. And I hope we can look to this model as we try to extend what we're doing around the world.
Thank you, Anne, to you for the opportunity. And thanks, Justin and Tom, for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Delma, for making this so easy and so pleasurable.
Yes, absolutely. And I will volunteer Delma as a resource for planning these types of things, because she has lots of experience that's hard to squeeze into a half-hour talk that she's, I'm sure, happy to share.
Wonderful. Thank you again, all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Delma. So our next set of panelists